Grant, what'd I say? Oh, sorry, Grant.
Brian just said that there's no audio. Try it again. I unmuted this one.
This is Steph online. The audio just came on, so we can hear you now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry about that. So I was just saying that we are waiting on the notice of funding opportunity to come out for the bridge investment program. That is the next $200 million ask. With the feds, we expect that this month. We expect probably a fairly quick turnaround. So the team's going through that, tweaking it for specifically that program. So sorry, we're getting a weird echo. So they're just getting ready for that to come out. We're working on the LOI for TIFIA. We're setting up a meeting with the USDOT in order to talk to them about exactly what they want in that application or that letter. So when we get a meeting set up with them, then we'll know exactly what to submit on that. We're also working on a 3-year cash flow diagram, and we'll be presenting that to or following up with the chairs on that. So the treaty MOA, treaty tribe meetings. We had a really good meeting with Yakima Nation that we talked about at the last meeting. We're going out to see Umatilla tomorrow. So it's myself, Commissioner Fox, ODOT, and FHWA, and Herb Frick from Akana. So we'll be out meeting with them. We are still waiting on Nez Perce to provide us with their edits. It went through their council and their executive committee. Their lawyers just doing some final touches on it. We hopefully you'll see that this week or next week. We also, and you'll see in your packet, we got Warm Springs has now sent us their letter of support. So we now have letter of supports from all 4 treaty tribes. So I think that was a big step for the project to get that final letter. RBMC, there was a link in your packet, and we'll try to do this from now on is to big documents. We're just going to provide a link so people can go to the documents rather than putting the hundreds of pages in the packet. But the RFP is out there for industry review and agency review. It will be out there for 3 weeks. At the end of that, we do have some time reserved for one-on-one meetings with the industry. To go through any comments that they have. It'll really be more of a listening session for us or clarification of maybe something they've brought to us. We do have one company that has already reached out and set up a meeting to sit down and go through that with us. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback and we'll be ready to go with that. Geotechnical, they did finish up all the borings. They are in the process of writing the data report. So once that comes out, we'll share that with everyone. It'll be probably the end of October, right around the time that the RFP goes out. We'll have a data report that'll go out with that. Right away, we're putting together a right away plan. There'll be a presentation at the next meeting for right away and survey to talk about just the right away process on a federal project and the steps that we have to follow in order to do that. We have a unique situation where we're going to be doing it both for Washington, where we have to follow Washington rules, and within Oregon, where we follow Oregon rules. We are trying to do some research, and we'll probably get with legal on this. The ability to work with some of the agency properties that we have to acquire or get easements from prior to having NEPA, because you're really not allowed to do any of the private parcels without NEPA. But we would like to see if we can advance some of the state agency parcels. That'll include the port. Click County, I think, has one, as well as ODOT and WashDOT. So we'll continue that discussion and just trying to get ahead of that right away phase and not let that be a critical path element for it. Permitting, we're continuing to talk to National Park Services. We're waiting on them to get through the review of the material to see whether or not the buildings on the port side are under 6F. Once they have that, then we'll be able to move forward a little better with the evaluation of the property and also clarify some of the mitigation elements that we'll have to have related to 6F. That process will just be hopefully in a month. We'll hear from them. That's what she said in her last email, was that she had all the data that she needed, but she needed about a month to get to it. So it's not critical path, but we just need to continue to stay on top of that.
Is she out of Portland? Where's she out of?
I think she's either out of Bend or Salem is where she's from. We did have three project updates. We had Parsons, which is a design firm, KPFF, another design firm, and Skanska contractor that came in the last 2 weeks to get updates on the project. So with the RFP coming out, industry reached out a lot more. We've got 2 more meetings Wednesday with a couple additional designers and the contractor that are interested in the job. So we're excited. Hopefully we'll see a good response and be attractive to industry. We did a presentation on the 6th to the Society of American Military Engineers, SAME. That was just an update on the project. We did kind of transition, and you'll see this in the presentations going forward, to talk more about the Bridge Authority and how the transition is happening from the port to the authority and the new ownership, just because we need to start building up that credibility and that recognition to folks that there is a new agency leading the bridge project. So we're starting to do that, as well as starting to have conversations about the preferred alternative and the design elements and the procurement of a progressive design bill, again, just to show that progress. So we're moving from talking about the history and why and the older project. I think everybody understands that now, and now shifting into talking about kind of where we're going and what we're going to do with the money. So. All right, that's it.
Okay, let's move into committee reports, engineering update. Oh.
One more report, which is the budget report. It's actually the schedule. If you want to take just a minute, and Brian can update you on the schedule.
Sure. Brian, are you there? Can you update us on the schedule for the budget?
The schedule for the budget. We'll have a budget report next meeting. Our monthly financial update based on August actuals will be in the next meeting packet.
Yeah, so this one will be on the schedules. So I'll have them update the schedule. So the first meeting will be schedules. I'll change that on the agenda from now on. The second one will be the budget discussions. So. But Brian, you can go ahead with the schedule.
Okay. What would you like me to present? The schedules we talked about last week?
Yeah, the ones that we reviewed with Commissioner Fox.
Are they in the packet?
No, I thought you had them.
Yeah, I can bring them up. Give me a second.
There was a flurry of activity concerning the confusion in the Columbia Gorge Press article about the role of the Bridge Authority and the role of the port. Is there any resolution or explanation on what's going on there? Am I imagining this?
I don't think I saw that one. What,
You sent the email on it.
this was. Remind me.
About a week ago, the Columbia Gorge Press wrote an article where they described the toll increase and who was administering and who was responsible for what.
Oh, yeah.
There was a retraction on that and a correction on that article to fix they had referred to, I think, the wrong agency and the toll increase stopping in 2026. So they did a correction to that article. No, you're correct. Yeah, they did a correction to it.
What the article said, for those that didn't see it, it basically said there's not going to be any tolls beyond, initially it was 2028 on the current bridge. And that was all messed up. So the port called the newspaper, got it corrected. If anything, it should have been 2026, July of 2026 and beyond. the idea is that they're not going to use any tolls on the current bridge for anything other than maintaining the current bridge or the new bridge. Well, they didn't get that part of it in the article, and they got the date wrong, but everything else was right. So we got to them, they pulled the electronic version of it immediately. And the following week, they corrected it and put it back out. So
They also corrected the date and time for the wire rope installation as well.
So I've just heard more confusion lately than ever before, which is odd because we're making the most effort now to get information out. And I wonder if there's some correlation with that, because now everyone is confused, including people who are usually reasonably well informed.
Well, I've been talking to Chelsea Marr, if you want me to comment.
Please.
Okay, so they are under, it was really a resource issue on their side. The reporter, Noah Noteboom, normally submits those articles to either Genevieve or myself, just to make sure they're factually accurate, but he was on a time constraint and it went directly to press from his editor. And so there was a lot of issues and concerns, and I talked to a number of port commissioners and had two conversations with Chelsea Marr. The social media posts were taken down almost immediately. The article was rewritten and then reposted. But frankly, it was just a newspaper resource management issue. Normally, the port has an opportunity to review the facts in those articles before they go to press.
Yeah, and I would add that I think as the authority is starting to mature and people are realizing it's an agency, there's still a lot of confusion as to whether it's just a part of the port or it's independent. And I know at the events, we get a lot of discussions about that, and, oh, you mean Washington now has a say? And, so I think the more we can continue to do that, we do have some posts and things we're doing on the website to get the, authority members out there, the interviews and those kind of things, just to build some of that recognition up. But I think it is still a little confusing for people as to what the authority is versus the port.
we can jump back to the schedule if Brian's not available. We looked at about 3 different schedules a couple of days ago. One was the progressive design build schedule, and it's moving along as we expected. And the schedule that we have in the package relates exactly to that particular schedule. So there's no significant concerns there. The geotech schedule, by the time we got it, it was basically done. They're into the analysis part of it now, and that'll be finished by the late November, December timeframe. It's going to get rolled into the RFP before it goes out. So that's in good control. There was a schedule on the treaty tribes, the MOAs on the 4 treaty tribes. It basically is worthless because we tried to put together a schedule, and the treaty tribes are basically on their own schedule. So we suggested during that meeting that we change it from a schedule to kind of a stoplight chart that shows the key steps that we still have to go through. And against each of the 4, where are we on that process? And I know Mike and others are working hard with the tribes trying to finish this thing. And I think we had a really good meeting with the Yakimos, and I think there's a little sense of urgency there. So we'll see, type of a thing. The one schedule that Brian's going to be working on, I believe, is the whole cash flow requirement for TIFIA, getting a TIFIA schedule pulled together. But what is concerning to us is that we need to have a very good understanding for the first 3 years what is our likely cash needed to be on the project? We're gonna have grants, but some of the grants we have to pay for up front, and then we get them reimbursed through the grant. But we need to kind of have a really good understanding of what's that flow and how much are we gonna have to front to determine where are we gonna find that money. So Brian's working on that with Carrie and others. That's what I remember, Mike.
Brian, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you like to share your screen and go over that schedule again?
Sure. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right, this is our overall, you guys have probably seen this before, and it's our overall integrated project summary schedule. Just highlights all of the major activities over this 10 to 11-year time frame for the project. We will be using this as a basis for some of our discussions next week at the organizational readiness workshop next Monday. But it highlights at a high level how all the pieces will fit together based on certain level of detail. You can see in this quarter, we just finished the MPDT grants that went in, so that's a check mark. Total revenue started, increase started this quarter. LOI for the TIFIA loan will move out, should be done in the next quarter, as well as the RFP going out at the end of October, as Mike mentioned. The data report for geotech that Mike mentioned is also in the next quarter. Pretty soon, subsurface exploration completed. Our next major attention or focus will be on the relocation of the port and other right-of-way processes, as well as getting the phase 1A of the progressive design build contract up and going as fast as possible. That's the overall schedule. Are there any questions about the overall project schedule?
Any questions? No questions here, Brian. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, now we will move on to our engineering update. Mike Fox.
Other than the schedule, we don't have a meeting this past period. What I would like to do, though, is hold the team behind this meeting for a few minutes to talk about our future schedule. One of the things that we are going to have to come up with, I believe, and bring to this party is 2 policy kind of documents coming out from us. One is, what's the policy going to be in reviewing during phase 1A, various options? We need some guiding principles during that particular process. The second piece we've got more time on, and that is same type of thing in 1B. 1B is when we're designing the project. So the experience shows during design, there will be a lot of pressure to start changing the looks of the bridge and whatnot. That's the purpose of 1A, to get all of that figured out. At the end of 1A, once we say, everyone in this room says, yep, we're good to go, we really don't want to change anything in 1B during design unless it meets some principles, which we need to come up with. Some of the obvious ones, if it just won't work, we got to fix it. If it's absolutely not constructible, probably got to fix it. If there, those types of things we want to put together and get everybody's agreement on before we go into 1B. So we'll be working on that this fall before we award the contract.
So I've got some questions. this 1A, 1B concept. There are a lot of questions that I have or interests that I have concerning the non-moto portion of the bridge and kind of what that looks like and how it's designed. We won't know best practices on that until we have an expert come in who can look at the problem and tell us what the best practices are. So how does that fit in this process?
That'll be during 1A.
Okay.
So we want to make sure that we're getting all the right input on the configuration of the bridge, how we want to move things around during 1A. So the idea is at the end of 1A, we know exactly what we want to build and what we want to design. During 1B, they go design it. So they're not talking about what color bridge do you want, et cetera. It's basically, we need to step back, stay out of the way, make sure they're making the right progress, but don't let them slide some scope changes into it.
So maybe just for some more familiar terminology, I struggled with it a little bit, but 1A is kind of like a schematic design process that you might have on a project. 1B is really where you're getting into the drawings and the detailing and the actual engineering. So let's try to figure out exactly what we want and then let the experts at actually detailing it and constructing it run as quickly as they can and as efficiently as they can.
And then can you remind us again of I think it's also interesting, Arthur, to hear the actual time limits that are like 6 to 9 months are associated with different presses too? Because Mike, can you remind us of what the times are?
Yeah, so 1A, we're looking at a 9 to 12 month time period to get to the end of 1A, and there's 4 main deliverables at 1A. There's existing conditions, there's alternative assessment, there's design criteria, and then a base design. So at the end of 1A, we want those 4 things. So we want to know what's out there. We want to know how we're going to control it as far as the criteria goes. If there's any changes we want to make, we want to work through those. And then we want a base design that we're going to move forward with. Phase 1B will be 18 to 24 months. And then the phase 2 construction is approximately 4 years, plus or minus 6 months.
So does that mean that the choice of construction technique happens in 1A?
Yes, sir.
Yep. So when we select somebody this year, we will have the contractor on board from day one. And that'll be the contractor theoretically that's going to build it as long as we can keep everything moving forward. Meaning that they can, we got the right project. They can come with a price that's going to be something that's, buildable and within our budget. Then we will move forward with that contractor and that designer. But that contractor will be there from day one, making sure that they can build what we're designing. Where in other processes, you design it and then the contractor comes in and says, well, I don't want to do this. This eliminates that.
So one of the real critical things that I see in 1A is that we're going to have a really good understanding of the $520 million.
Right.
And as we start looking at options, option A, option B, option C, and we see that option B is cheaper than A or C, we still have to understand what does it do to the 520. We need to be on top of all 4 of those things because we're driving ourselves to live within the 520. We have to make sure that we keep that focused in front of us all the time.
And so another example, something like what the piers look like, whether they have to extend down to bedrock or whether there's a pier that can be done on gravel, issues like that. That's all 1A.
Yes.
I would look at 1B as a bid build job, kind of your standard, just go build it. All the parameters you're doing, you're just going out and designing it. That's really what 1B should be.
I guess one question I have, if 1A, we're walking out of that with kind of the schematic and the look. So are we anticipating that the aesthetics committee is interacting and very involved in 1A? Because it sounds like after that, we're locked.
Yep.
Okay.
So we've already started working with the Columbia Gorge Commission on developing an aesthetics committee. So we went through an exercise with them of here's the regional people that we think should be involved. Okay, we got that narrowed down. Everybody kind of agreed that that's the right group. Then we said, okay, well, who from that group then should be involved? We've got that narrowed down, and then we're gonna go out to that group and kind of say, hey, do you really want to participate? Do you not? Is this the right person? And try to get a 12 to 15 member committee together. And then we'll start to have meetings on that, and we've got a little bit of a guidance on what their role is based on what the NEPA documents define their role to be, which was to provide kind of guidance or information on, ideas, not approval of anything. But we want to get that process started. So once we get it a little more formulated, then we'll bring that back and introduce everybody to the committee, to the board, and, here's the committee. And, but the idea is that during 1A, they will be involved, and by the end of 1A, we'll be done with that process. And we really have to be, we really can't go into 1B with big questions out of the aesthetics committee.
So I guess then the next question I have is, are we factoring in the cost for the needed public outreach to be part of this contract that's about to be awarded and separate from what we're paying as an authority to someone like JLA? Or are we expecting JLA to pick up this type of outreach with that committee?
So the idea would be that JLA will pick up that work. It won't start until the public outreach piece won't start until about the end of our current contract. So April, May timeframe of next year. But the thought was JLA will lead it because they've been the one interacting with everybody. And the aesthetics committee and the design team will support that. So the designer and the contractor's role will be basically the committee will come up with 10 ideas. They'll sit down and say, well, this will cost you $1 million. This will cost you nothing, and we can kind of measure out then which ones we want to implement or which ones just are cost prohibitive, maybe time prohibitive, as far as how we put them in. But that's what our thought was that JLA would stay that point with the communications piece.
That makes sense to me. I think I'm just more curious about the cost where we're signing it. And I feel like that's going to be a lift. It should be, because we will get a lot of public input. And so I feel like that amount should be coming out of what we are giving as this contract award, even though it's not going to go to whomever's getting this contract. There has to be that understanding that they're then paying, that's going to JLA and we've committed to them.
Yeah, and that's part of looking at the PCE. It doesn't really get into that level of detail as far as how much communications was in each area, but we'll have to take that into consideration of, part of the management contract. What was the original scope of that? And, what have we taken on that maybe was in the other piece, or, you're at a pretty high level project cost estimate at this point. Very high level cost estimate at this point.
The original concept of the RBMC that we had, and when we did the first estimate, included this kind of stuff in the umbrella contract. It's not to say that the progressive design build contractor is not going to be right in the middle of it. They certainly will be. But I think we want to be able to manage communication going out from this entity, and that's probably the best way to do it. Is we've got control of that contract. The other thing that's going to be really important with Brian and others like Brian is that you think about all these meetings that are going to be taking place, during phase 1A, and there's going to be a lot of A, B, and C, and let's take C over A, and then you get 10 other things that are going on at the same time. We have to have a mechanism to track all of that so we know which ones are still open, that we can decide on which ones are locked up. And of the ones that are locked up, what's the implication on the 520? So it could be that we've agreed that we're going to go ahead 3 of them that add another 25 million to the job. So now we got to find 25 million offset someplace else to bring the cost back down into something close to the 520. Unless we decide we want to go get a bunch more money from grants, which we probably don't want to do, at least first cut.
I guess, and then I won't continue to belabor this, but I'm just wanting to make sure, because there is a cost assigned to outreach and information, that I think whomever's getting this contract would traditionally have to handle. And whatever that number is that's getting assigned either comes back and stays over, but that we're not chipping into the funding that we've already secured for the overall public outreach we need to do to get rerouted over to this effort.
So the way we're doing our contracts are year by year, and it's based on whatever scope for that year. So if we decide that we're gonna do that work and the contractor's not, then when we sit down with the contractor and negotiate with them at the end, when we do the selection, then they won't perform that work, we will. So it's, we have this umbrella number that is kind of all the design, overall design estimated cost and the overall management estimated cost. And, will those numbers go in between? Yeah, depending on whether we decide it's more efficient for them to do something or if it's more efficient for us to do something. But we're still somewhat constrained under that total number of, you only have so much money for design and so much money for management. But every year when we do our contract, it'll be based on the scope that we're going to do for that year. And then the PDB will kind of be the same way. It'll be based on the scope they're going to do for that year. So it will fluctuate up and down depending on, like I said, you guys might say, hey, no, or we may find out that they have more resources and have more capability to deliver something and we're more of oversight or supporting depending on who we get. Those things will happen as we kind of go through this, but overall, we're going to still be constrained by the 520, which then is still constrained by how much is allocated to the management side and how much is allocated to the ownership side. And then, we're tracking those numbers. And as we track those out, if we see that we're trending higher, as Mike said about construction, it's the same thing with design. If, we start tracking higher on owner's rep, somewhere that money's got to be made up either by we're reducing the design fee or the overall project's changing, right? So it's kind of the same thing. If the design fee goes up, then somewhere else you've got to figure out how you're going to balance that increase or accept that number was just incorrect and that you found out that you needed to do work that you weren't anticipating.
I'm just going to leave it there. So just to bring it to a slightly higher level and put a slightly sharper edge on what Marla is saying, every project that I've worked on, every public project, the public becomes interested when it's too late. And everything that we can do, we need to make sure that by the time 1A is done, this whole project becomes really boring. 1B is the boring phase where none of us have anything to say in it because it's just, what the numbers say and someone taking out their slide rule or equivalent and doing the math on it. So I don't know how you get that message out. Fortunately, we've got an expert here and we have experts with JLA, but the fact, I'm just, it's so exhausting to be working on public projects where you ask people, you get minimal input, and then construction crews shows up and starts pouring cement and people say, why are they pouring cement over there?
It'll happen on this job. No matter what we do, you're going to have some people that are like, you're building a bridge. That'll just happen. I think part of it is going to be this group sticking to, hey, we have done as much as we felt like we needed to do, and you not paying attention is not something that we can fix. But it's going to take a little bit of a public stance to do that, but you guys need to be comfortable that you've done everything that you can sleep well at night to say you did what you should do.
So that's my thing. If we're about to give someone $200 million, and these numbers are not written anything clearly, but just to illustrate it clearly, if we're saying that this contract word traditionally would be 200 million, and we know that we need this intense outreach in 1A, and we've already built up the sweat equity with someone like JLA, they're already a step ahead. We're doing this new guy a favor. That contract becomes 195 and 5 million stays over here and is the comms that they're not having to do because we want that control. So I just don't want them still getting 200 and that 5 is going somewhere else. And then we're carrying the burden of the extra cost.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The secret, I think, to success on this is going to be that as soon as we get this progressive design build contractor on board, I think we've got to sit down with them And we've got to lay out this 9 to 12 month schedule in detail that shows all the interfaces to the outside that we're going to have, and what are the issues we're trying to resolve. Example, are we going to do a precast or are we going to do port in place? That's just one of them. There's 50 of them out there. We got to get that down onto a schedule and then communicate through JLA and your communications meeting or council to make sure that the public knows when they need to get engaged in this thing. So we can check that one off. Okay, we've got that one resolved. Let's move on to the next one. But we've got people invited to participate.
Is there in the RFP something that can we make sure there's nothing in the RFP that says they're responsible for the communication? I think that'd even be more clear for the contract, like the consultants coming in, I think it's like, if this is a concern, I think we should definitely just make sure in the RFP it's clear. I think in the interview process, we should make it very clear that this is what we already have done so that everyone's on the same page. So just so your concern is not only heard, but like voiced. So there is not like, oh, wait, hang on, where's this extra 5 million going kind of thing. Yeah.
JLA wrote this section in the RFP about communications. So they will balance what their scope and schedule and budget is versus what the design build team is expected to do. And then JLA will set the expectation of overall, this is what we want to accomplish on the project. Right. And then they will marry those two scopes and budgets to deliver this overall program. So that's how we'll do that with every discipline, right? There'll be a certain amount of work that we're going to do, a certain amount of work that the PDB team's going to do, and together that'll be the ultimate scope that everybody thinks is needed to finish whatever element we're talking about.
Anna from JLA, did you have your hand raised?
Hi there. Yeah, I did, but I really don't want to derail the conversation. I think all I wanted to add was that we have been working really hard to front load people into this process, and we built a really big list of people who are interested already. And so, and I think that's been said. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
That list of people.
Okay, we are going to move into the governance update from Commissioner Babbitts.
That would be me. Okay, so there are a few different pieces. The first piece is that there's been no work happening on the governance documents like our bylaws and things like that. We're waiting for some bandwidth to be available from our attorneys, and they've got a bunch of stuff on their plate now. So I'm just going to wait until I'm told that there's time to work on that. I don't think, we're getting along fine. So no crisis now. So we can let that float until we have time to formalize the process. What we're really doing is trying to put in place documents which will last for the next 50 years. We don't need to stop anything time critical from happening now in order to do that. So don't be surprised. There haven't been any governance meetings, haven't been any discussions on that. Second thing is that I was asked to take a look at the IGA, and I have done that. What the issue with the IGA is that an IGA is a legal agreement. What we really need is a meeting of the minds between the Port Commission and the Bridge Authority as to what we're asking the attorneys to write into an IGA. And so I was given the first document, which was kind of an outline of a legal document, and had some discussion with Commissioner Anderson and with Chair Chapman at the Port of Hood River to talk about kind of what is needed moving forward. And I think there's a really solid I don't think there's a lot of space between discussion I had with Commissioner Anderson and discussion I had with Commissioner Chapman on this. So I wrote up the document that was a plain language description of what we're trying to accomplish. And I wrote it up last Tuesday and had like 80% done and just needed to sort of polish it and finish it. And then I've just had crisis after crisis in my several other lives. So I haven't finished it, but I'm hoping tonight to get back to it. I've got the documents sitting open. I just need to probably just reread them and make sure that I've finished. I suspect that's usually what happens. Usually my first go is actually pretty complete. But I need to verify that tonight before sending it out for some further discussion. I guess the next step would be to send it to what I guess is effectively our executive committee, which is two folks to my right and to Chair Chapman to take a look at it, and then we can bring it to the broader group. But I'm really focusing on it being clear, plain English, and really identifying what I don't like to let things be unresolved at the beginning, because everyone thinks that when these meetings that we have, the easiest thing to do in a public meeting is, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah. And I never let a meeting end that way. It's always, let's put everything explicitly in writing. Let's highlight, even try to irritate out the difficult points, because it's a lot easier to resolve them now than it is later. So that's what I'm trying to make sure that we've done, so that we've all have informed consent over the deal points and can then let our able attorneys and the port's able attorneys go and actually write the IGA. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next up, communications report, Commissioner Keith.
Hi, guys. Well, we just came off a stretch of more in-person outreach. So thanks to the commissioners that were at the market last Thursday. And then yesterday, we had JLA and Mike and myself at Huckleberry Festival, which was quite the happening weekend. If you made it over here, we even caused some bridge delays, I think, just from the crowds. But anyway, I think that's also why design was top of mind, because I would say the two things that came up through the good turnout that we had at the booth was questions about the toll increase, and then the design of the new bridge and what it was going to look like and how it would still be aesthetically bring value to the area. So on that note, I think it is just top of mind that that's going to be a big thing we encounter. On the website side, we've had a good conversation last week with the HNTB team along with JLA that's going to be working to do that full transition over to the .gov for the website, and how there will be the separation between the authority presence in that .gov space and how we'll continue to use the project portion of the website we've already built out. I know you guys all got the email about the .gov emails, and I think today, if you need help, that can get set up. We're also really trying to do some earned media this fall, and a lot of that is about very strategic placements, hopefully, in the markets and publications that some of these decision makers might be happening upon as we've submitted the federal grants, and just knowing that we really are angling for this year to be the year that we see a grant award and next year as the backup. So I think that's going to be a big focus on the JLA team. And then the other thing, I think, just to echo what Mike was saying earlier, continuing to work on ways to emphasize the role of the authority and that the authority exists. So a lot of that media that was gathered at the picnic last month will start to be getting turned around as well, so that we can start to personalize and hopefully let people identify who's behind the authority and what our role is. Anna or anybody else on with JLA, do you guys have anything to add?
Hey there. I think the only thing that Mike Shannon brought up over the weekend, which I think was really good, was adjusting some of the way we talk about how much of the funding of the project has been funded. And so starting to take into account the tolling, the new toll revenue, and say, well, we can kind of start to count that now. And how do we show that? So it doesn't just look like we're $400 million short, which we're really not. So I thought that was a, really good point. We'll be working on displaying that and communicating that online and in person in the coming weeks.
Thank you, Anna.
Questions?
Yes.
So I've got two questions. First is by far the number one question that I get asked is why wasn't money put aside for the last 40 years for the bridge? And I have an answer which I've been giving, which is somewhat inartful. And rather than say what I've been saying, I want to ask what is the recommendation. Well, okay. What I've been telling people is, because I've talked to Oregon people, I've been telling people, you elected the port commissioners for the last 40 years. The time to ask those questions would have been 40 years ago. People who are here today are doing the right thing. So that's what I've been saying. Is that the right answer, or is there a better answer? I have another question after this.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was gonna say, first of all, we've been working on kind of the talking points and the FAQs. And with all of those things, even when we're trying to create language you guys can fall back on, I would say the most important thing, especially on this question, which comes up a lot, is to not be coming across robotic. And I think the natural answer is inartful and an acknowledgement that, whether you are happy with the way port tolls or the tolls on the current bridge were used or not, that owner was in their right to take some of those tolling dollars. And what we've tried to emphasize, and even yesterday when this would come up, is really shifting towards the future, which is why we pushed for the last 2+ years to get this authority created, why we stayed on track to get it in place on the timeline that was anticipated, because all of this is to set in motion a new stage of tolling in our communities, which is that new bridge, it's all committed. I don't know if you're pulling up the language that we had worked through, which I think is still actually in draft form, even though I know you're looking at the draft one, Mike. But I think whatever, because I can imagine that Commissioner Fox's answer might be a little bit different than how I'm going to frame it, or Commissioner Babbitt's, or anybody else. But I think that the key thing that I try to focus on, and what we try to drive home in some of the answer, is just the importance of how that's no longer what's occurring and why it's different and how that happened, and that it's really, locally led.
The final, my conclusion when I last had this discussion, which was probably just this morning or last night, was that if you want a bridge before this existing bridge fails, you would be doing exactly what we're doing today. So doing the postmortem on the last 40 years is not a productive thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that whole thing of there's like a retributive way of looking at this, or restorative, which is if you're going to be scornful and frustrated, you go backwards and complain and critique all the poor decisions that were made. But we are here focused on changing course and moving forward in a way that is restorative to the community and is not based on some bad past practices. And I think it's tough in those moments to stay focused on not getting into a back and forth or a finger pointing, but as best as you can to be focusing on everything you just said. Our focus is making sure that we don't have a situation of an emergency where we haven't done everything we possibly can to make sure the new bridge is there. And it'll really help once we get these federal grant dollars. It's tough right now when the things we can point to, and I think Anna's right, we need to start showing that local contribution. But when it does still feel like the lift is being placed on everyone here, literally this month, as their toll rates are going up, it's unfortunate that we aren't showing maybe some of these other parts of the pie getting filled in yet.
That was my second question, which is, I'm looking for a way to, I am personally surprised and grateful that 80% of the funding that we're anticipating is going to be coming from outside of tolls. And I was expecting that we were going to have a 100% toll supported bridge. And it's looking now like we have a reasonable chance at getting a 20% toll supported bridge. Do we have a way to message that?
So yes, I think we do. And I think part of that is that, and you'll see this, and we're going to go over the frequently asked questions as one of the action items. So we can either wait and do that, or we can do it now. But we'll go through that, and if that's something we need to add on, but we do have some answers to where the funding is, where it's coming from, how much money do we need. So we can talk about that when we do the frequently asked questions.
I know it's very new, but could we add something to the website that shows the amount of money raised by the increased tolls? I think that's something we could point the public to. And yes, it's going to be very low dollar right now, but I think an interesting thing to show people, and they can see it grow.
Hey, Anna, are you available? I can flood up. I was gonna say.
Yeah, I heard the comment of the suggestion about the kind of real-time tolls showing that on the website. I think there was a response that someone said to that I did not hear.
What I was gonna ask you was, if you share your screen, can you pull up our interactive funding?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. Let me bring it up. All right.
Yeah, I think Jacob's point about and I think Anna, you had already talked about this too, working through a way where we can also be incorporating that projected toll revenue that's also going only to the bridge and is really going to help to fund that final portion that we need in the loan as part of that like 118 tally. Is that kind of what you were saying of you would see that filled in also what that local contribution is?
Yeah, I was talking more specifically, how much money have you raised in a month with the tolls? Specifically, how much money has been set aside for this project? I think it's for people to conceptually see a number and say, oh, okay, you've raised $2,000 in a month. That's just going to this new bridge. That's a number that someone can say, okay, I see how this is working.
So at next meeting on what day are we at? The 25th, Debbie, is actually planning to talk about that. So we can talk about it at that meeting, whether we want to do something that we put out where it shows a little ticker, I guess. But she was going to cover that about where we are and what we've done since September 1st at the meeting, on the 25th.
So for this interagency agreement that we're talking about, we ought to have some kind of a disclosure of how much money is going into that account. And as I remember right, from the port side of the house, we were planning on doing that once a quarter, issuing that kind of a report out that says, here's what the toll increase amounted to this past quarter, and here's the balance in the account.
Like microphone showdown. It's interesting, and maybe this is like a good conversation for all of us to have at the presentation at the next one, but just since it was brought up here, I think where my head first goes, and this is probably just fresh from, sounds like some of you are hearing from a lot of people about the tolls too, but because the project has struggled for decades at this point to finally reach here, I think there's also a little bit of a cynicism that I'm protective. I don't know that it's going to benefit us to do monthly reporting, because if I look at it, I feel like it's a ripe area to criticize, like, oh, seriously, you have $2,000, like $2,000 for this $520 million bridge, and maybe shifting it to say, this is annually, like in 2024, we're going to see it grow to this, and maybe quarterly we'll do that. But I guess I am nervous that it could backfire on what we're trying to do of get more information out there, like create a layer where it actually gives people who are already critical or maybe not informed about the project and all the progress we've made something to really hold on to in like a soundbite space of social media, and almost hurt our efforts that I think we've been successful in over the last year and a half to try to get better information out there. I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just cynical on this part, but if it was only going to tick up like $2,000 a month, I feel like that's just going to be okay.
If it's $2,000 a month, we're never going to get a Tiffy loan.
So I would say, let's see the numbers. Debbie will have the real numbers next week. I think it will be more, it better be more than $2,000 a month. But yeah, I think then once you see that, then it may be something actually worthwhile communicating out.
So I took Jake's comment a little bit differently. He's a GIS guy, so he understands data visualization. I think that the problem is communicating to people, not the numbers, but the size of the numbers. And
you're headed for a target. We're headed for a target, and what we're trying to show is incremental progress to that target. And the target isn't 520 million, it's something like 40 million or 50 million or something, or even less than that. It's just 20% of whatever the loan is. So it's 10 million, and that should be very visible if you're making progress to that type of target.
So the actual number that we were targeting when we did this whole study, we wanted to have about $16 million in the bank by 2028. And then about 21 million by the time we open the bridge. And we would use any extra there for first year operation until the tolls really started kicking in.
So if that is your benchmark, then any numbers that we're collecting $1.75 at a time are gonna march up against that much more clearly in a graphic sense.
Thank you for the communications update, everyone. If we may move on, let's move on to the approval of the minutes from 8/28/23. Was there any changes?
I move that we approve the minutes as presented.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, next up, we're going to move for the approval to move forward with the lease for the office space. Staff report.
So we've been looking at two different locations. They're summarized in the report. We can go through any questions that you have about the summary. We tried to make it as apples to apples as we could. One of them is the Institute location down at the bottom of the hill where their old headquarters used to be. The other one is the Radcom building that's about halfway to the bottom of the hill. They're very similar. I think the Institute has some benefits that the Radcom does not have. I think it would slightly outweigh that in our analysis of which one would be the better one. Location, the ability for everybody to be in the same building and co-located, I think are some benefits. But we could go either way. We have a letter of intent that the Realtor for Institute had sent over. And what we'd like to be able to do is work with the chairs to move forward with getting to a final lease so that we can get everybody shifted over and get the move done and get ourselves set up and have our own place. And that would be what we'd put in front of you today.
Any discussion from having reviewed all the documents, please?
One of the things that I just jumped out at me based on all the engineering and phase 1B that we've been talking about is this space over down in Bingen is not conducive to what we've been talking about. So there'd have to be some sort of improvement to make that work.
So one thing that's not completely clear on the floor plan, those offices are huge. You could easily put two, and in some of them, 3 offices in one. So I think, and we have the ability, if you look at the yellow space, that would be the early space. The red would be the total space. So when the PDB team comes on, the idea was to do double that. And talking with a lot in the way just the engineering industry has gone to now with COVID, we will more have their leads or a smaller group here, and the actual day-to-day designs and things like that will be done remotely. So we're thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 20 people between our group and the progressive design build and contractor is probably about where we'll have, and that'll fluctuate a little bit depending on what's going on. But I think both of the spaces will be adequate.
I think what I'm reacting to are the enclosed offices, and when I've participated in this type of effort, we ended up with we had 35 of us all in basically 2 spaces that were co-connected. And what that gives you the ability to do is see the person you can talk to, and if you don't have that, then we're working at cross purposes what we're trying to set up, I think, in our RFP documents.
So the way the offices are in there, it's all on the same floor. Yes, they're closed offices. Neither one of the spaces offers an opportunity to have just a big open work area with a bunch of cubes. But I think having everybody in the same building would serve the same purpose, where we can walk across the hallway and get with one of the progressive design build team folks or our own internal folks. I think that opportunity is still there with either one of those spaces.
I just offer up, I've been to both facilities and I think the one in Bingen we can make work. It's a little different than what I'm used to, and Eric, you too, big open spaces. But what we're probably gonna see, you're gonna have half a dozen people locally, and then the others are gonna be zoomed in or team meetings. There is a couple of very large conference rooms there that you could put your 30 people into, and still have room for, video and so on. But there's at least one big conference room, and then there's, I think, two smaller ones that you can make into a really good work session. Even the other place, there was only one room that was really big. Everything else was cubes or offices.
Yeah, I think what tends to work really well is having people in an open work area so that they have visual connection to each other. And just looking at the Bingen space, if you took those 6 enclosed or semi-enclosed spaces out of the middle, along with 3 on the right-hand side, then you start to open that up to a collaborative space that you can actually work in that way. So,
And then I think the issue would be any cost or do anything like that would fall on the project. And in all the places we looked at, that just does not exist or doesn't right now exist in the area.
So let me give you kind of an optional way to operate this thing. And I was on a project and it worked really good. Everybody had these little tiny offices scattered around. But 3 times a day, we would marshal into the big conference room. So first thing in the morning, all of the managers were in this conference room, and we had a kickoff for the day. Kind of the plan of the day, here's what we're doing and so on. Then we captured again around lunchtime. Everybody would, if they weren't going out to eat, they'd sit there. Then the last thing at night before you left, you got back together and made sure that, you're ready to go for the next day, kind of a thing. So you could use that kind of an operation, I think, pretty well in either of the facilities here. But you don't have the big wide open spaces. And remember, the people that are probably going to be in here from the progressive design build are going to be the very senior level people. Their people are going to be deployed all over the country. So they don't have an on-site heavy team.
Hello. Okay. Sorry. There's 2 buttons I hit on the same time. Another thing though, Eric, I just want to talk about is we are talking about that really collaborative feel and the team feel. And that's something we're looking for in the RFP. I think post-COVID, sometimes people are even in the same building next door and they're still in the virtual meeting and not going in person. So I think as long as it has really great Wi-Fi, I think it'll be, whatever one will be pretty good. And I think that should be a consideration just because we as a commission can't tell them how to meet, when to meet, how to work this out. And I think everything that has worked in the past is great, but I can tell you running a business with everyone's virtual now, and it's kind of, the new people don't even like to come to the office. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that as well.
it wasn't very long ago that I asked if we'd maybe move past the collaborative space. I think what I'm kind of reacting to is just trying to make sure that as we craft the RFP and we put the RFP out and then we provide space, that we're being consistent with what we're trying to accomplish all the way through. And this just feels like a little bit off. Anybody that gets in here, they'll figure out how to work in there. The question is, have we provided the most efficient way for them to do that in the way that we want them to do it? So.
No, and I appreciate the comments. I think it's setting that tone up front, and as Commissioner Fox said, setting up the idea that we're gonna get together and manage the meeting. You'll see in the RFP, there's a lot of progress meetings, a lot of technical meetings, a lot of, things where we want to get the groups together and not allow them to be siloed and do those things. So I think if we set the tone up front, that's how we're gonna have to manage some of that.
I had a question just reading the letter of intent and then the side-by-side comparison. So is it 7,000 total or 6,500? That's rentable.
65. With
Okay.
that that you-
So the total rent that we're paying starting in July would be 8750, or what is the way that it's split in the side by side is showing a 3,000 or a 4,000 split, and then that letter's only 65, and just trying to be clear on what we're paying and what we're getting.
And that would be part of the negotiations of getting to the final numbers. What we've talked about right now was $1.25 a square foot. So whatever the end square footage of that would be.
And then if we're going with the Bingen space, there's clearly this commitment that that additional space is being held for us, and we're gonna start paying the operating expenses on that cost October 1 too.
Yeah, we will have to provide a space for the PDV team. What the RFP says right now is they're to provide their own space. Typically on a project, you turn it over to the design build team. They'll go find something. They don't care what it costs. And they will say, here's the bill. This is what we found. And we're trying to preempt that a little bit to get something that's a little more reasonable and say, hey, we've already got a space. You don't have to worry about it. Here's where you can come in and do, work with us. But yeah, I mean, it's part of the project is setting up the project office, and it's kind of a necessary cost that comes into it, so.
But just to be clear here, this is the upfront project office. Eventually during phase 2, there will be a construction office, probably on the other side of the river, close to where they're actually building the bridge. There will be all kinds of temporary shacks and that kind of stuff out there. But this will be for the professional group.
Any further questions on the lease? If not, would someone like to make a motion to enter into the lease negotiations?
I move that we proceed with leasing space at the in situ building per the documents in the presentation package.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Just let the record show for Zoom, Grant Polson was the second, since he didn't hit his button.
Second.
Hearing no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, thank you all. We're gonna move on. Informational items that you haven't hit in your report.
I got that message last time, so I will not duplicate. The .gov, you got an email out after this meeting. If you'll stick around, there's a little bit of a process to get your .gov email set up. Commissioner Fox came over and we practiced on him this morning. But there is a little bit of a process to do it. So if you'll stay around, we'll help you get through that and get everybody set up, and then you'll have your .gov emails and we can all start to work off of those going forward. The Joint Transportation Commission is on the 27th. We're starting to put that presentation together. Right now, we're looking at the presenters being Commissioner Anderson and Commissioner Fox. And attending right now, I have confirmation on Commissioner Fox, Commissioner Polson, Commissioner Keithler, and Commissioner Anderson. And I need to know if the remaining two board members would like to attend. We are a little limited in the number of folks that we can take on this one, but we would like to have all the members, or as many of the members, and then their direct alternates or an alternate, if we can, to have a full 6 at the meeting if possible.
Yeah.
So we're missing 2 commissioners from having the full board there. Can the last 2 commissioners make it to the 27th? And if not, can we identify 2 alternates to take their place?
This is here, right?
It is at the Best Western for lunch.
Yeah.
So, yes.
I called it.
Okay, so Commissioner Babbitts will be, and we need to talk to Commissioner Gibson. And I don't think he's on. Okay, so we'll need to follow up with him, and if he is not available, find an alternate. The way Washington set that up, it would, well, it goes in order. I think Seth was first and then, Eric was second, yeah.
I believe I can probably arrange to make that if he can't come. He and I can probably coordinate directly if we want to go ahead and keep with that ordering of alternates.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you. The other piece in the informational is we did get asked to go do a presentation for the Columbia River Gorge Commission in November. It's just going to be a project update, so it'll be here locally. So we'll put something together for that. The link for the RFP and the schedule are in the informational packet. And the project frequently asked questions. We should probably take a minute to take a look at those frequently asked questions. We would like to get any questions related to the responses. Make sure everybody is comfortable with those, because we would like to use those going forward as kind of our standard, or at least starter answers for those questions. And then there are some additional ones that we will be putting out, but this is the first set that we wanted to get everybody's okay on. So
I've got one to add for consideration. On a number of these events, it keeps coming up. Can the new authority use tolls for anything other than the new bridge or maintaining the new bridge? So I think one, under your tolling here, you may want to have a question and a response of that. And of course, the response is no. It has to stay with the current bridge, operation, construction, maintenance of the new bridge.
So I think that brings up an interesting point, which we should note for legal. In Oregon, only port authorities are able to use tolls for things other than the bridge itself. There's strict legal sidebars that a city, county, whatever that owns the bridge can only use the funds for the bridge. When it gets decided exactly what we are, what the bridge authority is as an entity, that's it does matter, because it's a question of whether statutory permission. But no, I understand, but it's an easy answer if you have statute right in front of you.
So I'll work with legal. There's federal statutes that we have to follow, and if there's locals, we'll document those too. And I believe it was actually also in the CFA in the Oregon bill. So I think there's multiple places where the new authority is constrained on being able to use it for anything else. So.
Thank you for clarifying.
My point is, there is the need for us to establish, are we a special district? Are we a port district? Are we a municipal corporation, a general municipal corporation? What are we? And this is another piece on that list.
Has everyone reviewed the frequently asked questions in the packet? Is everyone good with those answers?
I want a pie chart.
I've got one other comment that it really hasn't been brought up, but I kind of see it in Facebook. It may be worthwhile stating in this, we're all volunteers. None of us are getting paid for this commission. Nobody told you, huh?
I think that's a really good point. I think that there have been a lot of comments about kind of where did these people come from? What are their motivations to be there? And I think making it clear that there's not much motivation other than trying to help would be worthwhile if we can get that message across.
And this document is, you know, it's going to grow as we get more questions, but I think this is a great start that we can put on the website. With that, any other changes? Okay, moving on. Okay, let's move into our presentations. We've update from PFM. Are you available online?
Yes, we are. And if it's okay with you all, I've got a short slide deck for us to share with you.
Please do.
So good afternoon, everyone. So we've been, the PFM team has been, participating in the various calls. We have historically served as financial advisor to the Port of Hood River, and we've been working with Debbie and the HRWS staff on various elements associated with the project financing. And I know that, our name has come up, and, some of us have been participating in your, or at least listening in on your regular meetings, and just wanted to give you an opportunity to get to know us better, introduce ourselves so that you kind of understand the role that PFM plays in these types of projects, and so that you know who the team is that's here with you. As I mentioned, we've been working with Debbie and the HNTB team on things like, scoping out a financial model, and talking about, the TIFIA process, with which we're well versed, and we'll give you a little bit more background related to that. So we'll go ahead and introduce our team here. So I'm Mary Frunker. I'm a managing director in PFM's National Transportation Practice. I mostly do work in alternative finance and public-private partnerships, but I also do a lot of work with TIFIA. In particular, PFM is in the pool of advisors to TIFIA when TIFIA is working as the lender on a transaction. So I lead PFM's efforts with respect to our engagement with the Build America Bureau when they're making loans under the TIFIA and RIF programs. I've also worked with borrowers under the TIFIA program. I work with the Maryland Transportation Authority, which is a bridge operator, and with other agencies when they've been borrowing from through the Build America Bureau programs. I started my career working at the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, managing their debt programs, but I also come with a background in credit analysis. I worked as a ratings analyst at Moody's Investor Service, and at a bond insurer for many years. Peter?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. Good afternoon, commissioners. It's good to be here virtually with you. My name is Peter Schellenberger. I'm a managing director at PFM. Work out of our San Francisco office. I've been with the firm for 22 years now. Previously to that, I did reside in Washington, D.C. I worked with KPMG on the transportation planning front. So I have most of my career has been working in transportation, and now in transportation finance. I've closed several TIFIA loans, and we currently have a TIFIA loan in the LOI stage for State Route 11 for San Diego, the new border crossing between the U.S. and Mexico. So an interesting and fairly complicated project and an LOI application, but that's a short overview of who I am, and nice to see everybody today. I'll turn it over to Brad.
Hey, good afternoon, Brad Gilmino. I am new to PFM. I joined about a year ago. My background was originally investment banking, so I did a lot of banking for transportation-specific debt. Then I actually moved to HNTB to start a financial planning practice there. I worked in their tolling group as well as in their advisory group. So I do a lot of new toll program development work, do a lot of toll policies, specialists in tollings and project finance as well. And currently work on a couple transactions that have toll revenue bonds and TIFIA as well for projects in North Carolina and Alabama. Mudra?
Mudra, you need to unmute.
Is this I
Can
had
hear
to
you.
double mute. Yes, okay, sorry. Hello, everyone. I'm Mudra Patel. I'm a senior managing consultant with PFM. Been with PFM for 8 years now. Before PFM, I was like Mary working with rating agencies at S&P and rating muni bonds. But to be honest, I much rather prefer to be on this side of the table, helping clients build their credit story instead of poking holes at it as a rating analyst. But at PFM, mostly just work with transportation entities, do a lot of work with Peter out of the San Francisco office. And then, like Peter mentioned, I work with him on the SR11 project, very interesting, the border crossing. And apart from them, also working on another TIFIA LOI, albeit not in the toll space, but on the airport side, because they're the newest beneficiaries that have been included and eligible now for TIFIA loans. So we're working with airport clients to procure TIFIA loans and sort of kind of starting on that new journey. So working on and obviously working with you on your TIFIA LOI and thank you for the opportunity for kind of being here today and look forward to working with you on this. But Peter, hand it over to you.
Peter, you want to talk about PFM?
I'm sorry, I had a brilliant start to that. Now I'm unmuted. Sometimes we're back in person. I wish we were up there with Debbie a few weeks ago in your chambers. So now I'm at large head on your screen. So I appreciate your bearing with me. Just a couple slides on who we are. PFM was founded in 1975. We are a national firm, so we like to say we do bring a very focused plan of finance to you, but with a national perspective. When it comes to transactions, all we do is provide advice. We do not underwrite, so we have a municipal and fiduciary responsibility that comes with that sole focus. Some of the services we provide include the planning, the financial advisory. We do have a consulting practice that just looks at how entities operate. We'll largely be focused on financial advisory, if not exclusively for you. We'll go to the next slide. Snapshot of our footprint. We do have a Portland office. We also have a Seattle office, and then 2 others in California, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. About 30 offices nationally, 350 folks working together. As a transportation group, we meet every Friday. So we try to share stories learned across the nation when it comes to toll finance, when it comes to TIFIA, challenges, what we're hearing from the Bureau. And as we collect that information as a transportation team, the 4 of us on the phone today, we will filter that through to Debbie and others and yourselves directly. So that's kind of our approach to the business. I think I'll pass it back to Mary.
Yep, thanks, Peter. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the role of an independent financial advisor. So our job is to actually serve as your fiduciary. And the role that we play is working with you to develop a plan of finance that's most advantageous to you given the financing mechanisms that are available to you. We've spent a lot of time talking about TIFIA, and we compare TIFIA to a capital markets execution. What are the advantages and disadvantages of that? And really kind of working through with our clients, to make sure that they get the most advantageous financing structures that are available to them. The other thing that's important to us is that even when we're working with clients on primarily TIFIA programs, is making sure that it fits within an overall financing context picture so that it leaves you the flexibility to access the capital markets either while you're accessing TIFIA or at some future time, that you have basically all the tools available to you in order to raise money. Our goal is to really provide you with peace of mind that you've got a third party, a well-informed and experienced third party that's available to work with you to identify your opportunities, but also to work with you so that you get the execution that's both timely and also, again, meets with your addresses your interests and addresses your needs. We are regulated by the Securities Exchange Commission and the Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board, and that's really there to protect you as an issuer. Even borrowing from TIFIA makes you an issuer in the capital markets, but again, we also want to make sure that you have the flexibility going forward to be able to access the capital markets. And so any structuring that we'll do will be through the lens of both, not just this what would be a private placement with TIFIA, but also with what you might do in the future as publicly issued debt. And then Brad, if you'll talk a little bit about our transportation practice.
Yeah, we are the #1 ranked financial advisory industry, so that brings with it a lot of benefits, right? We have a robust view of business. We got a healthy pricing desk. We see all kinds of different deals inside of the market, but we're also #1 in transportation too. It's a very nuanced field. Obviously, tolls is a specialty inside of that, right? So this is something that we pride ourselves on as being the true leaders in transportation, and we've been ranked that way for quite some time. On the next slide, we just want to showcase some of our tolling experience in particular. We work with toll authorities across the country, basically looking at different type of structures in order to get the financing that you need. So, we do have a big book of business that we can lead off into. And like Peter said, that's going to bring some of that innovation that we're doing in other places. It brings the relationships of USDOT, of the financial community, of the rating agencies, and investors as well. So our reach will be pretty healthy, and we're looking to continue that.
Richard, you want to talk about our TIFIA experience?
Sure, and so on this page, you're seeing a lot of boxes that each one represents kind of a TIFIA loan that we've worked on, or the blue ones represent specifically toll loans that were backed by toll revenues. And 30 loans here, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but just given how intimate and intense the TIFIA process is, it takes 18 to 24 months to get a TIFIA loan done. 30 loans, it sounds like a big number, but it is. And then just having been through the process so much, it kind of just gives us a lot of knowledge about all the little things that are involved in this process. There's a TIFIA handbook that I often go back to. It's 90 pages, and you can memorize it, but there's just so much that's unwritten. And just having been through this process 30 times with them, we kind of know, all these little instances where they may have, granted an exception to a client, how to circumvent certain rules and get clients sort of more beneficial terms. Again, just having been through the process so many times, we have knowledge of all the kind of best practices, TIFIA preferences, and kind of understand the process really, really well. It evolves, and as you see in the box, there are a few loans that are in progress. Peter mentioned that we're working on the SR11, which is in the LOI stage right now. Again, at any given point, there are people in our firm that are in this process, and as Peter mentioned, we talk every Friday and share kind of what's going on, and all of those ongoing that TIFIA kind of will get funneled to us, to the people that you're seeing here, to you, to your benefit. And then there are some boxes that are not on this page. Mary mentioned, we act as TIFIA's advisors too. So these are just loans that we are working on with our clients, but we've also seen things from the other side of the table, and supported the bureau itself in evaluating these loans and advised them. And all that is to say that we have a working relationship with the bureau. I wouldn't be overstating it if I say that they like us, and they have a certain amount of confidence in PFM and and in our approach to the process and how we kind of deal with everything on behalf of our clients as far as TIFIA loans are concerned. And on the next page, I wouldn't be overstating if I also say that TIFIA also likes PFM's models. As you know, with the LOI, you'll have to submit a TIFIA model. And it's not just for the application process, the TIFIA model. There'll be annual submissions of a TIFIA model for the life of the loan. So it's something that you have to live with for a very long time. And we've built several of these. So each of the 30 loans on the prior page, we've built TIFIA models for that have gone with the application And then some clients kind of just kept those models with us and like us to update them every year for their annual submissions, and you're seeing a list of that on this page. So again, the point being, it's an important aspect of their application. And then we've built a lot of models. I personally have built quite a few, and we've already built one for you. And we're working with Debbie and HRWS to kind of revise all the inputs that go into it so that, you know, it's ready to roll when we're ready to submit our LOI application. And so I guess just to sum up, we do a lot of this. We do a lot in the transportation space and the toll space, and we do a lot of TIFIA loans, and you know, we're excited to kind of start on that journey with you as at this LOI space as we start to think about the next steps in schedule and kind of how to approach this process here. So I know, Peter, Mary, if you have any closing thoughts.
Yeah, I'm just going to stop sharing and thank you for your time. And open it up to see if any of the members of the board have any questions for us.
Are there any questions from board?
Yeah, I've got one. So, as you probably know, we've been working with HNTB, Kerry Witt, looking at, you know, the whole tolling studies. And he's explained to us very generally what we're going to have to do to be able to qualify for a TIFIA loan. And we're trying to target having that loan in place no later than 2028, assuming that it would be the last money we would use on the project, probably for tearing down the old bridge after the new one's open. But as we got into this more and more, and I'd like to maybe have some more discussions perhaps later on, as we start attracting grants, some of the grants, we have to pay for the work up front, and then we can get reimbursed by the grants afterwards. We're going to have to figure a cash flow out of how do we pay for that work until we can get grants to reimburse us. So that funding source for that kind of work, we're going to have to figure out. And I don't know if that's an earlier TIFIA close or if there's some other financial vehicle that we ought to be thinking about. And I'm assuming you folks would help us with those discussions.
So we've already started some discussions with Debbie and Carrie and the HNTB team about your cash flow needs while we're going through the project development phase. There are some challenges with TIFIA, primarily that they're going to want to see your construction contract in place. So what we've been sort of eyeing is the idea that, you know, the TIFIA loan will be ready to close when you're ready to have your construction contract in place, which, you know, right now we're looking at the first quarter of 2026, right? And so TIFIA is really not a financing vehicle for kind of cash flow management during the development phase. So we'll look at some other alternatives as to how we might be able to manage that.
And I would add, I know you don't plan to draw, that's probably one distinction, draw on the TIFIA loan until 2028 towards the end of the entire project. But you will want to have your plan of finance in place prior to really launching into the major construction. And so even if you don't draw, and you only begin to accrue interest with a TIFIA loan when you do draw, you will want to close on your TIFIA loan, sort of in that first quarter 2026, have everything come together, all your grant funds are committed by that point, and then your TIFIA loan is closed, even if you don't plan to draw on it. The interest rate will be set at that point in time, so there's some strategic consideration when exactly you close, which you could revisit as you get closer to that point in time. But having the entire plan of finance coalesce and sort of in place at the time your construction project, your construction contract is finalized, that's the goal.
Yeah, so if we're into construction late 25, early 26. And if you're saying that we need to have the TIFIA authorized by then, we were assuming for $100 million TIFIA loan, we needed to have about $15 million in reserve by the time we close on that loan. In other words, we activate it. Is that still reasonable? Because we're gonna have a problem if it's 26, we may not have that 15 million.
So, by the time that you draw, you'll probably need to have that you would need to have your funds on hand. It's really, you can't borrow, unlike a publicly issued bond, you can't use TIFIA to fund things like a debt service reserve fund. And so we're looking at those that build up of reserves to fund some of the reserves that you would need once you start to close out your project and draw on your funds. So you wouldn't need those reserve funds available at the time that you close on the loan. It would really be once you go to draw on your loan.
Understand. Thank you.
Understand that we can't draw on TIFIA loans necessarily as lines of credit to bridge the time gap in between invoicing and getting grant reimbursables. Are there other line of credit products that are available for these kinds of builds?
We believe there are, and we're looking. We're helping. We've started conversations with Debbie and the HRWS team to identify those. We're also well versed in the funding mechanisms through federal highways and how to sort of make sure that the timing of your draws are as advantageous for you as possible.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Hearing none, thank you all for your very informative introduction.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, we have upcoming presentations on the 25th. We'll have the right-of-way on federalized projects and the raised grant scope overview. Is there any thing from any board members or alternates that you'd like to bring up today? I know we have one missing bowl. If anybody went home with a bowl from our picnic, I think it was brown. I don't know, somebody stole it.
I have a question unrelated to your bowl. If I can go back to the beginning of it, wasn't me. Mike, this is, I think, a question for you. The bridge improvement program grant, it's kind of maybe a two questions, maybe it's three. The first question is, how does that interact with the grant that we just applied for? And do those things compete against each other? Can they build off each other? Could we get one and the other do? And so can you answer that? And then that may lead me to another question.
Yeah, so the last time we were out in DC, we had those conversations with the USDOT about, what's the best way for us to apply, because they are looking to use multiple sources to fund projects. So we are actually in our applications referring to the fact that we're applying for these different grant packages and saying you can pick wherever you want to pick it from, but we would like 200 million. So they have said that gives them some flexibility. So that was part of the reason I'm us doing that.
So I have two follow-ups then. So we're only applying for 200 million to either of the different sort of streams of revenue. There's no, by applying to each of them for $200 million, there would be no scenario where we would be awarded in each of those. Okay. One other quick follow-up question.
So maybe a clarification. We're going for a total of 200 million. And let's say there's 3 programs. The maximum we can get out of the 3 programs is 200 million.
Understood. if I may, one other quick question. It's a bridge improvement program. We're not looking to improve a bridge. We're building a new one. I know that seems like a stupid question, but is that anything to worry about in regard to applying with what we're trying to do?
I think it's Bridge Investment Program is the actual title of it, but yeah, I mean, it's intended for that, so.
Sorry, the presentation you guys were going to do got canceled, postponed. Is there any plans to pick that back up for Region 1, ODOT, next month?
For the ACT grant?
No.
Or the ACT presentation? Yeah, if they would like for us to come back, we told them we would be happy to come back and do that presentation. Yeah. I think the location is somewhere around Portland, though, so.
Yeah, location is down in Clackamas at their headquarters down there, and the date's October 2nd. So I can see if they want to Zoom you guys in or go down there or whatever works. I'll find out and let you know.
Yeah, we offered to, and for some reason, I'm thinking they said there was some reason that they were full or something on the 2nd, but if they need us on the 2nd, we could probably make that work, or probably November too.
Speaking of that, whatever happened to the Pacific Northwest Waterway Association presentation? It's where?
It's in
October, so it's coming up. Okay.
I had one request I have a request for a future presentation. This has come up recently in conversations, and it was something the bi-state working group was it was brought up when we were considering the toll increases at that time. But I think revisiting what potential scenarios could look like if we were to consider a recommendation to the port of, for lack of a better term, like a frequent flyer on the bridge. Could we at least get the data and see what the top 10% or 20% of breeze by customers in a month, how many trips they're taking and what that threshold would be? And could we look at what would be involved if we were to implement a scenario of once you hit X amount of trips in a month, you either revert back to the original toll price or some sort of reduction that could be seen for frequent travelers. And then it's also been brought up in the context of businesses on the Washington side. And I don't know if there's any exploration that could be done of, is there a scenario for business owners that they pay a certain amount as their annual pass or an unlimited pass that gives us the funds that we had been projecting, but also hopefully for frequent business users would give them some benefit.
Yeah, I mean, we can get with, what is it, P Squared that collects all that data? I mean, the one that runs the tolling and see what information they have. Typically, they classify a lot of that stuff. There's all kinds of different ways you can do different tolling scenarios. They all come with their pros and cons. But yeah, I mean, if there's, I would say limit it to a few different ideas, and then we can put together kind of a matrix of the pros and cons of those ideas, because some of them become administrative problems and you spend more money than you actually it's worth. So I think you just, we can look at those and look at different ways to do it. It's also the accuracy of the data, the ability for you to monitor how that's being used, and it doesn't become, anybody can somehow use it. So yeah, everybody's always looking at that when it comes to a toll agency, of how you can give discounts and how you can, offer different people different scenarios. So at some point, wherever you want, we can engage in those and run some different scenarios.
I think there's two questions here. Question one is really for the current bridge. What's our options on the current bridge? And I think that needs to go to Kevin and let him research it, because the little I know of the software, it's not real friendly. It's not like the new software that we would likely have on the new bridge, which should give us a whole bunch of different opportunities. The one thing that kind of off of that, we probably don't need it for a couple of years yet, but it's not too soon to start thinking about what are the types of traits we want to be able to talk about on the new bridge. These various tolling scenarios. start making a list and keeping it so we don't forget about it. So when that time comes up to start designing it or picking a vendor, we've got it.
Just to emphasize that to me, the question, we shouldn't be spending a lot of time talking about tolling mechanisms and all of these different aspects of exactly how the toll is implemented, but what we are trying to accomplish. Why is it that we're talking about giving a discount to businesses? What is the attempted basically, you know, what do we really want to, who are we trying to benefit and why?
Yeah, I would say that it's really a lot of our conversation and the emphasis we've placed on this need for a toll increase is that the locals have to pay their contribution. I think that's accepted and acknowledged. However, there will be certain, I think being able to say that we are also addressing the most frequent users in our community, whether they're the households or the businesses, and understanding that if we're making that argument at some point, in fairness, do they not reach a point where they've done their share of subsidizing the new bridge? I think it also gives us an opportunity, back to what you were saying earlier, we know the history of this project, and for people paying attention, it's not lost that there is a reserve over at the port that was built up over time and that was not offered up to give us a head start to this amount we now need to raise. And I think saying that we are looking into these scenarios and considering what it would look like is a good show of faith that we are intending to operate differently.
So I think what I would translate what you said into is that your goal is equity. So you're describing an equity situation. I think that's great. And I think we should talk in those terms rather than describing, you know, exactly which person should be paying how much toll and that sort of thing.
Thank you. That was a much better way of saying it.
Anything else for roundtable discussion? Or for the good of the order, come.
I think we've been getting much better with these microphones.
I want to go back just half. Just half a step. We talked about the equity thing, and I think it's good. People paying more than their share. I think there's the other side of that where people are paying the toll that is much higher based on their relative income, and we ought to be thinking about that as well. It's the two edges of the spectrum.
Somewhat interesting fact, when we set the toll at $1.75, the toll folks are getting used to it now, but they're running through hundreds of quarters a day, which is slowing the traffic down, believe it or not. So they're running through, I think they're something in the neighborhood of 500, 600 quarters a day they have to bring in to make sure that the people can make change. Oh, yeah.
I was just gonna remind everybody that the Buffalo Bills are playing tonight at 5:15 PM. It's great if you have nothing else to do.
This is Seth Gilchrist online again. I just kind of wanted to further that conversation there on equity, and also in terms of, you know, low users, high users, all of those kinds of things. Before moving to the Gorge, I've lived in urban environments and always used public transit, and the ability to be able to manage my sort of monthly spend on that using a bus pass or something, an all-you-can-eat pass that at least allowed me to understand what I was going to spend, was really important for my budgeting at the time. And it also allowed, you know, things like student passes and things like that, so that there was a mechanism for these kinds of equity evaluations. And so that would be just something I think should be considered in that thinking.
Could the communications, could this be a consideration that we ask the community as what kind of, sorry, didn't mean to open up bad words, but it's a nice, we don't have to take the advice that is given, but we might not know what type of discounts the community would like. So it might be, you know, you submit your month, I would like a toll decrease based on what I make per month, or I would like a toll decrease based on how many times I go per, and you might not know what the community wants to do. And it doesn't need to be a super hard thing. I mean, you can create a Google form and have people do it. The only people that will respond will be people who actually care to respond, because it's another click, right, that they have to go do. But it might be nice to ask the community what they want, as opposed to us as a commission assume, because we don't know everybody's situation that's going on.
Just a word of caution there. Again, I think we've got to get a little smarter on the current bridge and the current tolling system that's antiquated about its ability to do things. If you ask the public too soon and they think that you're going to incorporate it on the current bridge, which they can't, then they're really just going to get really upset. Whereas I think it's a great idea to go out and ask the public, but it's really focused on the new bridge and what capability tolling wise do we want to put on the new bridge? Make sure we've got that capability.
Yeah, totally. And I also think in the way that you word the questions that you're asking, it can be clear that it wouldn't be able to switch over at the current time without the current bridge being affected for the new tolling system. What kind of discounts could you see or foresee, or might you want to have be optionable to you? I think the community will have it just gets a different way of the Bridge Commission listening to our communities and trying to ensure that we're also taking into account their opinions, which gives people a voice. And I just think I think it's easy for us to assume that people want it based on income, but we might be missing a whole idea. And that's just what I was trying to bring up.
Lastly, and Mike, correct me, but I'm thinking we're going to need to know that probably in 27 latest, 2027.
Yeah, I think, that is one of the things that this group will go through, will be your toll setting policies. That you'll have to do that, and you'll have to adopt your own toll rate policies and all of that. So all of this will be part of that discussion, getting public input, how they want to do it. But I think we're a few years away from that. But yes, at some point in the next 3 to 5 years, we will develop toll policies for the new bridge that, you guys will have to go through all those discussions.
Well, we're probably thinking about it. We'll probably have to do that kind of for the TIFIA loan, because they're going to project out, what we can afford. So it's probably earlier than 27.
And I'd just like to put a word of caution here. We're quickly straying into another organization's tolls, and that is another elected body that they have to deal with this. And they're quickly going to be looking at whether not to give discounts, but if they have to raise rates again in order to pay for heavy maintenance or something that may have to be done on this bridge. And so I don't want us to get too far down a track where we're giving out hope when that hope is 5 years away at the earliest, where we would have any ability to make that kind of an, unless we're going to say we want to take less to get to our 15 million or $20 million mark. In order to help people out today so that we don't build the new bridge. And I don't think that's a discussion that we can have unless we start bringing in way more money than we'd planned.
Well, I think again, so there's like a lot of good feedback that's come up. The specific request is really for staff to bring back a presentation of if we wanted to consider a recommendation, because you're absolutely right, it's the port, but they have also placed full ownership on the toll that they did on this body. So I think it's fair if we can consider a small amount of scenarios, whether it's the top 10% or top 20%, and what those implications are realistically over the formulas that were done about needed toll revenue that has to come in during the span that we need to raise these dollars. And if it seems like there's something there worth considering, is there a singular recommendation we'd consider giving to the port for them to determine how they want to respond? But it shows that we did our work to address something that did come up in the spring and was mentioned by state working group members as something to look into, and we did not at the time. So I'd like to revisit it. Secondly, I think there's definitely a lot of good feedback that will probably happen sooner than later of how we want to handle community input and outreach to start wrapping our heads around what the different options look like for that new bridge so that we can start talking about it into the community and have a decision or understanding of what we need to decide ready at that point. So I think there's two different things, and the near-term thing to me is about checking this box off of a task that wasn't completed in the spring, even though the toll is now in place.
So that made that sort of knocked something loose in my head. We don't really understand what information the port has access to. So really, that's what I would start there by understanding, because that would tell us if there's any hope at all of re-architecting this. I was surprised last time I talked to Debbie. I was surprised at how at things that they don't know that I thought that they did know. So maybe if we have an understanding of what the port knows, then we may have a more realistic view of this.
Sorry, sir. As someone who's been asked to do something that I think what we need, I hear what you're asking, and I just think if we're going to ask staff to do something, we have to be really clear with what we're asking, because what can you show us is very open. And I don't think that's what we're asking them to do, but in order to efficiently and effectively use their time, because it is the port's staff, I think we should, maybe the communications group should come up with what they actually want to know before we move forward, just because I don't know if we ask a question a certain way to staff, they may give us information that they're thinking is answering the question, but it's not, because we're not communicating clearly. I just don't think we right here, I can't distill what we're asking just yet. So I think that's just what I wanted to bring up.
I would offer up, the first series of questions ought to be, what's the capability of the existing toll system to be able to do some of these things that we would like? If the answer is it doesn't do it, then kind of stop there.
Well, I would say, sorry, I think you capture well, and that's a very good point. I think that's the presentation. And I don't know if the other commissioners agree, but I would appreciate, and I think would benefit from, even if the answer is no, show us why. Help us understand the limitations of the current system, so that then with that information, we can determine through a conversation if there is an additional ask to go do an exercise about what they could capture. And maybe it does show us that there's nothing there, but I'd rather see it than just be told no, because when this came up in the spring, that's as far as we got, was just the blanket. It's an old system, it's too complicated. Well, when people keep asking me the question, I want to be able to say from a place of conviction, like why it didn't go further or how we're looking into it, understanding the constraints.
And I'm asking a different question, I guess, because I'm thinking ahead into how we architect our future toll system. And I want to know what data the port has on the demographics or the details of the current toll collection that we can use going forward. And I think it's less than we think it is. And I think it's less than we will need to architect an equitable toll solution. So thanks for clarifying, because I think there are two separate asks there.
One question I would like of the port is, once we've had a month after the toll rate increase, was there a big uptick in the number of breeze by users when that came up? So.
Hey, Debbie, are you on? Hey, she was in rewind. That was kind of unfortunately, Debbie, you sound like Alvin Chipmunk on like high speed. So next meeting on the 25th, Debbie's going to present kind of what we've gotten since September. In the meantime, I could also, if you want, get with Kevin and we can do a little bit of research and maybe have her present a little bit more on what the capabilities of the system are. And then we can kind of have additional discussion once we know those. You still sound like a chipmunk.
Maybe if you talk really slow.
So I would like, I would like a presentation on how our video equipment works. There's something really clever
Hey, do I sound like a chipmunk?
here. You're good.
Okay, yep, Debbie's here, so go ahead, Debbie, and
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that we actually, so the software that we use for tolling is actually pretty good software. And I can get you a lot of reports out of it. And I actually had what we quote unquote called the frequent flyer. I actually have that report. And I thought I had sent it to you, but maybe I know that the mayor of Benton had asked for it, and I know I sent it over to her. So I'm not sure that it got out to everybody else because I thought that that was kind of put on hold after we talked about the fact that Breeze By was kind of intended to be the discount for people that travel across a lot. But I do have that information, and I can actually get a lot of information out of the tolling system because it tracks everything. Our financial accounting software is not good, but that's a separate issue. So at the next meeting, I can have a lot of information. If you want to tell me specifically what you want, I can either run the reports or I can get P Square to actually go in and run reports for me if it's something that I don't have immediate access to.
We will have staff get with you to get that list of questions. Thank you, Debbie.
Okay.
And go change the electrical on our computer.
Now that we've had our entertainment for the day, we are past our regular time for adjournment. Are there any last questions or comments from any members? And also one more time, I understand that our audio was not going, so I will open it up for public comment one last time. If there's any public comment, please raise your hand, unmute yourself, wave your hands, sound like a chipmunk. Okay, I don't see any public comment. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.